The engine died with a final shudder, and I snatched the keys from the ignition. The door creaked in protest as it swung open, allowing the muted silence of the village to creep inside the car. As I stepped out, my boots crunched on gravel, the sound absurdly loud in the stillness that blanketed this forgotten place. A chill breeze nipped at my neck, carrying with it the musty scent of decay. "Welcome to nowhere," I muttered under my breath, glancing around with a skeptic's eye. The sky above was the color of old bruises, clouds smothering any warmth from the sun. I buttoned up my coat, a futile defense against the creeping cold, and started walking. The village was a graveyard of homes rather than bodies, though given the eerie quiet, I wouldn't have been surprised by the latter. Ancient architecture loomed over me, stone facades pitted by time, windows dark and vacant. Vines clung to walls like desperate fingers, and gardens spilled onto paths, untamed and wild. Whatever charm this place once had was suffocated by neglect. History or horror story? I asked myself, chuckling darkly at the thought. But my laughter was short-lived, dying on my lips as I passed beneath the shadow of what must have been the church. Its steeple pierced the sky, a silent sentinel keeping watch over its domain of rotting wood and peeling paint. I could imagine them, the villagers of yesteryear, walking these very streets. Were they watching me now, whispering from hollows in the walls? Shaking my head to rid myself of the thought, I pressed onward. My camera hung heavy around my neck, its presence a reminder of why I was here. To peel back the layers of myth, to expose the bones of truth beneath. "Let's see if you're worth the trouble," I said to the village, not expecting an answer, and none came. I walked on, boots scuffing against the cobblestone, the weight of unseen eyes following my every move. A chill slithered down my spine as I rounded a bend, the cobblestones giving way to a clearing that buzzed with an energy that was anything but welcoming. A circle of villagers stood before me, their bodies swaying in unison, faces obscured by grotesque paintings that seemed to twist and writhe in the dying light. The rhythm of their chants, a cacophony of guttural tones, played upon the air like a discordant melody. "Quaint," I muttered under my breath, the word laced with a bitter skepticism. My camera felt suddenly heavy in my hands, its lens a barrier between me and this grim tableau. I raised it not to capture their likeness, but to create a semblance of distance from the spectacle unfurling before me. As I glanced through the viewfinder, a figure detached itself from the ring of fervent worshippers and approached. She moved with an eerie grace, her steps soundless against the earth, the fading light casting her shadow, long and thin upon the ground. The villagers parted for her, their chanting undisturbed by her exit from their ritualistic dance. "Anna," she said simply, introducing herself while the painted symbols on her face caught the twilight in strange angles. "You shouldn't be here." "Story of my life," I quipped, the camera lowering just enough for me to meet her gaze. "So, what's all this about?" I gestured vaguely towards the others, still entranced by their own fervor. Her eyes, dark pools reflecting the encroaching night, held mine with an intensity that bordered on unnerving. "It is the ritual of appeasement," she began, her voice a stark contrast to the chaos around us, steady and sure. "We must honor the watchers, lest they take offense." "Watchers," I echoed, the term snagging on a thorn of interest despite my reluctance. "And what happens when these watchers get offended? Bad weather, poor crops." "Much worse," Anna replied, her brow furrowing ever so slightly. "You may scoff now, outsider, but ignorance will not protect you from their wrath." "Guess I'm playing with fire then," I said, a smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. Her solemn nod told me she didn't appreciate the humor. "Fire," she whispered, almost to herself, "might be preferable to what awaits those who disturb the watchers." I considered her words, the weight of the villagers' collective belief pressing against my chest. It would have been easy to laugh it off, to dismiss the warning as nothing more than superstition, but something in the air, something electric and alive. Whispered caution. Thanks for the heads up, Anna. I forced casualness into my voice, though the earnest fear in her eyes stirred a disquiet deep within me. I'll be sure to tread lightly. Be mindful, outsider, she said before turning back to rejoin the ritual. The Watchers see all, and they do not forgive easily. As she melted back into the group, the chants crescendoing to a fever pitch, I couldn't shake the feeling that there were indeed eyes upon me, eyes that saw far more than I was ready to confront. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village in an eerie blend of twilight shadows and the dying light. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The previous hum of the ritual, now a low murmur, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Tell me, Anna, I began, my voice steady, despite the unease that had snaked its way into my bones. How long have these rituals been part of your traditions? Centuries, she said, her eyes reflecting the fading light. They're woven into the very fabric of this place, as old as the stones, and just as immovable. Sounds like a heavy burden for a bedtime story, I replied dryly. Belief is not a story, outsider. It's a lifeline. There was a steel edge to her tone that caught me off guard. All right then, enlighten me. What happens if you skip a chapter, decide to take a night off? Anna's gaze didn't waver. You don't want to know. Try me. Before she could answer, the world changed. A gust of wind surged through the village, fierce enough to make the ancient trees bow and the decrepit houses groan in protest. The sky, once a painted canvas of twilight blues, turned ink black in the blink of an eye. Christ, I murmured, squinting against the sudden chill that cut through my jacket. See? Anna's voice was barely audible over the wind. They are displeased. Who? The Watchers, I scoffed, but the word tasted like ash on my tongue. This is just weather. Is it? Her question was almost lost as the wind howled louder, an anguished cry from the heavens themselves. A collective gasp rose from the villagers as the first of the leaves began to whirl in frenzied patterns, as if invisible hands were conducting a symphony of chaos. I watched with a mixture of horror and fascination, unable to tear my eyes away from the spectacle. Anna, what the hell is going on? I demanded, raising my voice to be heard. Anger, she shouted back, her face pale in the darkness. You've seen the ritual. You've heard the warnings. Now you witness the consequence. Of what? Some old superstition. But even as I spoke, I couldn't shake the sense that something unearthly was unfolding before us. Superstition has claws and teeth here, Anna said, her voice tight with fear. And it doesn't care for your disbelief. I wanted to argue, to laugh in the face of the ridiculousness of it all. But the terror etched in the faces around me told a different story. These weren't actors on a stage. This was raw, unfiltered panic. Inside, get inside, someone yelled, and like startled birds, the villagers scattered, their earlier trance broken by survival instinct. Come on, Anna grabbed my arm, pulling me toward one of the nearby houses. As we ran, the wind whipped at my back, a cold reminder that the night had only just begun, and that my cynicism might have welcomed a darkness I was ill prepared to understand. Dust and debris nipped at my ankles as I stumbled through the pandemonium. The once still night air now roared with urgency, thrashing against the old-world architecture of the village like an ageless beast awakened from slumber. Above me, Anna's grip was iron, but even her fear couldn't drown out the cacophony of terror that rang from every corner. Move, Lyle, she hissed through clenched teeth. I was moving, wasn't I? Or was the ground itself revolting beneath my feet? Villagers blurred past in a frenzy of motion, their faces twisted masks of dread. Shadows clawed at the edges of my vision, dark fingers stretching toward the fleeing forms. In that moment, reason clashed with instinct. Every logical fiber of my being screamed denial while my gut knew. This was no mere panic. A chilling gust cut through the clamor, carrying with it a sound that ground my bones to ice. It was a low moan, a chorus of despair so potent it seemed to bleed from the very soil beneath us. I looked up, squinting against the wind's biting lashes, and I saw them, the Watchers. They were shapeless terrors, swirling in the tempest, specters woven from nightmares and whispering winds. Their forms flickered in and out of existence, translucent silhouettes that danced with a grace that belied their malevolence. A villager not far ahead crumpled to the ground, body writhing as if gripped by unseen hands. I tore my gaze away only for it to fall upon another, this one suspended mid-air, a scream frozen on her lips before she, too, fell limp. Christ. The word escaped me, a half prayer, half curse, lost in the storm. Don't just stand there, damn you! But I couldn't tear my eyes from the horrors around me. Buildings cracked and groaned, their aged stones succumbing to the relentless assault. Gardens that had overgrown into wild beauty were now upturned, their earth scattered as though by the fury of giants. My skepticism, that comforting cloak of derision I'd wrapped myself in so tightly, unraveled thread by thread. These were the Watchers, forces dormant no longer, roused to ire by the doubt of an outsider who thought himself above such primitive fears. And here I was, witnessing the result of my arrogance, a village besieged by its own protectors turned tormentors. Run, you fool. Anna's voice was almost lost to me now, her presence a fading certainty as the chaos sought to claim us both. I ran, each step a battle against the disbelief that still clawed at my mind. The world had gone mad, or perhaps it was I who had been blind to its true face all along. Panting, my boots slipped on loose stones as I sought the heart of the village, the place where answers lay hidden beneath layers of dust and superstition. The dim light from the windows of the elders' meeting house beckoned like a lighthouse in a storm of dread. I pushed through the heavy, ancient door, its hinges screaming protests that matched the cacophony outside. Help me, the plea ripped from my throat, raw and desperate as I stumbled into the candlelit sanctum. Meredith stood over a table littered with tattered scrolls and leather-bound tomes, her silver hair casting ghostly shadows on the walls. She looked up, her eyes piercing me with an intensity that suggested she'd been expecting my intrusion. "Tell me how to stop them," I demanded, my hands braced on the wooden table, scattering parchment. "Ah, Lyle, isn't it?" Meredith's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the turmoil that raged within and without. "You've already done so much." "Cut the cryptic crap, Meredith." Anger flared in me, hot against the chill of fear that had settled in my bones. "People are dying out there." "Silence is sometimes the loudest plea for help," she murmured, her fingers tracing the arcane symbols on a yellowed page. "The Watchers do not take kindly to disbelief." "Then what? We just bow to their whims, let them slaughter us because I didn't play along with a fairy tale?" "Respect is not a fairy tale," Thorne interjected, emerging from the shadows with a gravity that seemed to weigh down the very air. "It is the thread that holds the fabric of our existence together. You've unraveled that thread." "Great, so stitch it back up." My voice broke with frustration. "Only the penitent can mend what has been torn," Meredith replied, her gaze unwavering. Before I could argue further, the door burst open and Thomas barreled in, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his usual composure lost to the night's terror. "Lyle, you have to leave. Now!" Thomas grabbed my arm, his grip iron. "This is beyond you, beyond any of us. The consequences, Listen to him, boy. Thorn's voice boomed, echoing off the stone walls. Leave. I yanked my arm free. I started this. I'm not about to run with my tail between my legs while you all pay the price. Stubborn fool, Thomas spat, but his eyes held something akin to respect. There are fates worse than death, and the watchers are old. Vindictive. Then I'll face them. My resolve hardened like the ancient stones that formed the foundation of this cursed place. Tell me what I need to know. Very well, Meredith sighed, finally closing the tome before her. But know this, once you walk this path, there may be no return. Wouldn't be the first time, I muttered, my mind already racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. It was clear now. Escape was never an option. This was my fight, whether I liked it or not. I paced the narrow confines of Thorn's study, the air thick with the musk of ancient leather and fear. Thomas stood by the fireplace, his hands clenched at his sides, the firelight casting deep shadows across his rugged face. Our eyes met in silent understanding. We were about to dance with devils. All right, I said, my voice a low growl. The texts mention an offering, something to quell the Watcher's fury. Blood and bone, Thomas replied, his voice barely above a whisper. It has always been blood and bone. The elders speak of a chalice hidden beneath the roots of the oldest tree. It binds the offering to the land, to the very essence of the village. Convenient piece of lore, I scoffed, my cynicism a flimsy shield against the creeping dread. Mockery won't save us now, he shot back, his green eyes flashing with anger and something else. Desperation. You wanted a plan, Lyle. This is it. Fine, I snapped, grabbing the weathered satchel that lay discarded on the floor. Let's go appease some ancient, vengeful spirits. The night wrapped around us like a shroud as we made our way through the village. Screams echoed in the distance, a haunting chorus to the cacophony of chaos. The Watchers were close, their wrath palpable in the air, a scent like ozone before a storm. Stick close, Thomas muttered, eyeing the shifting shadows with distrust. We have one shot at this. Lead the way, I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in his hand. As we entered the heart of the woods, the darkness grew oppressive, the trees looming like silent sentinels. Every step felt like wading through molasses, the very ground resisting our passage. In the distance, an eerie glow beckoned, a beacon amidst the encroaching gloom. Is that? We approached the luminescent tree, its bark gnarled and twisted by time. I crouched, digging my fingers into the earth, feeling for the hidden chalice. My hands closed around a cold, metallic object, and I pulled it free, a cup wrought from silver, vined with dark, unknown metal. Here, I said, handing it to Thomas. Do your part. I'll make the cut. Drawing my knife, I pressed the blade against my palm, welcoming the sting of steel-biting flesh. Blood welled up dark and rich, dripping into the chalice held trembling in Thomas's grasp. By blood and bone, we beseech thee, Thomas intoned, his voice gaining strength with every word. Accept this offering, Watchers of old, and be appeased. A howling wind rose, whipping through the trees, snatching the words from his lips. The chalice began to vibrate, the blood shimmering with otherworldly light. Then silence, a pause in the world's breath before the plunge. The ground shuddered, and from the roots of the elder tree emerged ghostly apparitions, their forms flickering between this realm and the next. Their eyes blazed with unholy fire, and I knew we had not quelled their anger, but stoked it. Run, I yelled, terror lending wings to my feet. But the forest had come alive with malevolent intent, branches reaching out like skeletal hands to ensnare us. Forgive us, Thomas cried out, his plea lost amid the roar of the Watcher's fury. We were fools to think we could bargain with forces beyond our comprehension. As the Watchers descended upon us, their ethereal forms coalescing into instruments of torment, I realized the truth of Meredith's warning. There was no return from this path. We had doomed ourselves and the village to a fate worse than death, a never-ending nightmare from which there would be no awakening. James's hands were steady as he assembled the tripod, the metallic clicks resonating in the stillness of the deep woods. Around him, the dense foliage of the remote wilderness stood like silent sentinels, witnessing the intrusion of man into their untouched domain. He could feel the pulse of the forest, a rhythm that had continued undisturbed for eons until now. The air was thick with anticipation, and James's heart thrummed in harmony with the earthy scent of pine and the soft undercurrent of a distant stream. As he mounted his camera, a prized relic passed down from his father. Its lens gleamed with the promise of capturing nature's raw majesty. There was a tangible excitement that coursed through his veins, a fervor to immortalize the landscapes before him. Landscapes that seemed to whisper stories of yore, secrets veiled in morning mist and shadow. His fingers deftly adjusted the focus ring, the soft whir of the mechanism, a familiar comfort amidst the symphony of the wild. James ventured further in, each step deliberate, leaving faint impressions on the mossy ground. His eyes scanned the panorama with the precision of an artist. The viewfinder became his window to another world, a realm where light danced with shadow and beauty lay in the chaos of untamed branches against the sky's expanse. His blue eyes, deep-set and searching, flitted over the scenery, seeking that elusive frame where every element aligned, a confluence of time, space, and light. A furrow creased his brow as he captured shot after shot, his dedication etched in the quiet click of the shutter. James paused, crouching to adjust the angle, his movements meticulous, his breaths measured. Each composition was crafted with intention, each photograph a silent ode to the serenity he found here in the solitude of the wild, a serenity that often eluded him amid the cacophony of human existence. The rustle of leaves momentarily drew his attention away from the lens. A fleeting shadow, perhaps a deer or a fox, vanished as quickly as it came, leaving behind a lingering sense of connection with life's ephemeral beauty. The moment was gone, but the essence remained, captured within the frame of his camera, a frozen fragment of time. James's thoughts drifted to the spectral chorus he'd heard whispers of. A band of lost souls rumored to roam these woods. He shook his head, yet the thought clung to him, a thread woven into the fabric of this place, inseparable from the pines, the murmuring brook, and the ancient earth beneath him. Each snapshot was a piece of himself, laid bare and vulnerable, a testament to the past he carried and the losses etched upon his soul. In the solace of nature, surrounded by the grandeur of untamed wilderness, James found fragments of the peace he sought, a bittersweet respite from the nostalgia that gnawed at his core. He rose, his gaze lingering on the horizon where the sun began its descent, painting the sky with hues of longing. The camera, his loyal confidant, dangled from his neck, swaying gently as he moved through the forest, ensnared by its haunting allure, ever chasing the perfection in imperfection, the order in chaos, the whispers of truth in the silence of the wild. The whir of the camera's antique winding mechanism was the only sound to break the silence as James scrutinized the newly developed photo in his hands. In the corner of the image, where shadows pooled beneath a gnarled oak, there appeared a vagueness of form, a smudge that seemed to pulse with an ethereal glow. It was as if the camera had captured something unseen by the naked eye, a figure etched in mist, its edges blurred into the forest backdrop. James peered closer, his brows knitting together in confusion. The air grew still around him, thick with an unspoken question that hung like fog between the trees. He shuffled through the stack of photos he'd taken, his fingers trembling slightly. Each frame revealed more of these curious anomalies. Specters that seemed woven into the very fabric of the wilderness. A chill crawled up his spine, and for a moment, the beauty of the landscape held an eerie pallor, as though the earth itself whispered secrets of a darker hue. As night approached, the whispers grew louder, threading their way through the rustle of leaves and the creak of branches. There were not words so much as echoes of emotion. Longing, despair, a thirst for retribution. Threat resonated within James's own chest. His dreams, once an escape into the solace of slumber, now became a stage for the spectral chorus. Their faces flickered at the edge of his consciousness, each visage marked by the passage of time and the weight of untold stories. "Turn back," they murmured, a symphony of sighs that melded with the wind. "Danger lies ahead." Yet with each warning, James's resolve tightened like the focus of his lens. The specters took form in his mind's eye, not merely as phantoms to be feared, but as messengers. Were they leading him to truth or ensnaring him in lore? The wild's haunting refrain seemed to resonate with his own history, a dance of light and shadow that played upon the raw film of his being. A tattered journal caught his eye, a remnant of another soul captivated by these wilds. Within its worn pages, whispers of the past spoke of an explorer's journey cut short, of warnings unheeded. Each account was a beacon guiding James further into the unknown, propelling him with the force of a gale toward the heart of the enigma. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of melancholy purple and orange, James shouldered his pack and camera, the weight of his equipment grounding him to the present. The early light filtered through the canopy, casting long shadows that danced with unseen partners. James stepped beyond the safety of his campsite, surrendering to the call of the wild with a solemn determination. The forest greeted him with an unsettling stillness. The air, thick with the smell of pine and damp earth, held a palpable tension, as if it too anticipated the revelations to come. James's boots sank into the soft loam, the muffled thuds marking his passage through the underbrush. There was an eeriness to the silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves as a breeze sighed through the trees or the distant howl of a wolf. Nature's own mournful cry. The deeper James ventured, the more pronounced the sense of isolation became. Thorns snagged at his clothes, branches reached out like gnarled fingers, and rocks hidden beneath the foliage tripped his steady stride. Yet he moved forward with unwavering focus, every step a defiance against the wilderness that sought to claim him. He paused to capture an image, the shutter click slicing through the quiet, as if documenting his progress might somehow anchor him to reality. The spectral chorus watched in silent judgment, their presence an ever-tightening noose around the truth he so desperately sought. With every snapshot, every frame composed, he laid bare the memories he carried. The ache of loss, the sting of regret. It was not just the spirits of the forest that haunted him. His own ghosts walked beside him, their stories intertwining with those whispered by the spectral chorus. A sense of nostalgia enveloped him, the remnants of youthful exuberance and dreams unfulfilled. They clung to him like cobwebs, delicate yet persistent reminders of a life lived in the pursuit of beauty amidst decay. As James pressed on, the once familiar landscape transformed. Trees contorted into grotesque shapes, their bark like the furrowed brows of the troubled souls bound to this place. A breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of forgotten times and the echoes of names unspoken for generations. The forest's breath grew cold, a whisper of frost that settled on James's skin as he ventured deeper into the abyss of trees. His camera hung heavy around his neck, a lifeline to reality amidst the encroaching phantoms. With each step, he felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him, the gaze of the spectral chorus piercing through the veil of mortality. Flickering shadows played at the corner of his vision, teasing the edge of panic that threatened to rise within him. They danced between the trunks, ephemeral and mocking, their forms half glimpsed in the waning light, a haunting mix of sorrowful regret and seething rage. The eyes of the lost explorers bore into him, demanding recognition, seeking solace in shared torment. James halted, his breath forming clouds in the chill air. He lifted his camera, peering through the viewfinder with a steadying exhale. His finger hesitated over the shutter button. Could this device, so rooted in a tangible, capture the essence of these lost souls? A rustle, delicate as the fall of a dead leaf, brought his head up sharply. There it was again, a figure shrouded in mist, its countenance twisted by time and tragedy. The camera snapped, the sound slicing through the silence like a verdict delivered. The image would be a clue, a piece of the puzzle whispered by the land itself. He navigated the treacherous underbrush with the familiarity of one who had spent countless hours in communion with the wilderness. To evade the grasp of the vengeful dead, he retreated into the knowledge etched into muscle memory, the way to step where the ground was firmest, how to read the signs of the forest to avoid becoming ensnared. When a sudden gust sent a cascade of leaves swirling around him, James spun, his lens capturing the whirlwind of color and shadow. Amongst the chaos, he discerned shapes, hands outstretched, faces contorted in silent screams. Each click of the shutter a desperate attempt to understand, to communicate, to appease. James trudged deeper into the woods, his steps heavy with a weariness that seeped far beyond the physical. The chill of the night air wrapped around him like the clasp of a ghostly hand, and beneath it all, the whispers of the spectral chorus clung to his senses, a haunting refrain he could not escape. Shutter clicks were metronomic in the stillness, his camera flashing briefly like lightning capturing the phantom's elusive forms. With each step, memories long buried surged forth, insistent as the specters that surrounded him. Images flooded his mind, a boy's wide-eyed wonder at first light breaking over the mountains, an adolescent's thrill of capturing fleeting moments in a click, freezing them for eternity. A young man's pride at his first exhibit, the gallery walls adorned with his visions. But lurking behind those luminous scenes was a darker vignette, a betrayal, a harsh word not taken back, and the silence that followed. Forgiveness, he whispered to no one, the word a plea to the abyss. His mother had once told him that everyone deserved a second chance, but he'd squandered his without thought. He recalled her eyes, pools of sadness that reflected his own, when he had turned away from her apologies, from her love. The path underfoot grew rugged, and James stumbled, his knee kissing the earth. Pain flared bright and sharp, yet it was a balm against the relentless tide of guilt that threatened to drown him. "I'm sorry," he said to the shadows, as if his voice could traverse the years and mend what had been broken. He hauled himself up, leaning against a gnarled tree trunk for support. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and for a moment the whispers ceased. But then they resumed, more fervent than before, as though they sensed his inner turmoil and fed upon it. Driven by a mounting desperation, James pushed forward. He needed to find redemption, not just from the angry spirits that sought to claim him, but from the tangles of his past that bound him tighter than any spectral chain. With every labored breath, he sought a clarity that remained stubbornly out of reach, the answers to questions he had long refused to ask himself. His fingers trembled as they adjusted the focus on his camera, struggling to capture the essence of his pursuers. Perhaps in their stories, in their tragedies, he could find parallels to his own, could learn the way to forgiveness, to peace. The camera's lens became his confessional, silent witness to his confession of guilt, his testament of sorrow. Something hovered at the edge of his vision, a woman with eyes that held centuries of grief. As James raised his camera, there was a flicker of recognition, a sense of shared pain across the eons. In the click of the shutter, He felt a kinship with the lost soul before him, and a determination settled within him, as steadfast as the ancient trees that bore silent testimony to his struggle. Heart pounding, he pressed on, driven by the compulsion to face whatever specter awaited him, to confront the truth of his own making. The camera served as both shield and talisman, a conduit through which he might commune with the ghosts of this forsaken place. "Show yourself," the demand tore from his lips, a challenge cast into the growing gloom. And then, as twilight merged with the darkness of night, the forest obliged. Before him stood a figure, its form more distinct and terrifying than any he had encountered before. Its eyes, hollow yet accusing, bore into James's soul, unveiling the rawness of his guilt. James gasped, his face drained of color. James raised his camera in a desperate attempt to document the apparition, to prove to himself that he was not ensnared by madness. But as the flash pierced the dark, the figure advanced, its hand reaching out one last time. The flashlight's beam trembled in my grasp, a quivering circle of light that pushed back against the oppressive darkness, enveloping us. Our breaths hung heavy in the air, misting and mingling as we huddled close. The celestial abyss was vast, an eternal night that swallowed stars and hope alike. I couldn't be certain of anything, save that we were lost, with no signal, no connection to the world we had left behind. "Keep it together," I muttered under my breath, more to convince myself than to reassure my companions. The entity, that ancient horror lurking just beyond the frail reach of our lights, seemed to press closer with every shuddering heartbeat. Every shadow felt like its whisper, every silence a step of its unseen feet. My mind reeled with the knowledge of it, of them, entities beyond the realm of human comprehension, ancient as the void itself. "Is it really out there?" Jenna's voice cut through the stillness, her words laced with a fear that mirrored my own. "Out there, in here, it doesn't matter." I tried to keep the tremor from my response. "It's everywhere and nowhere. It's not bound by our physics." A flicker of movement caught the corner of my eye. I snapped my head toward it, the beam of my flashlight cutting through darkness like a knife. Nothing but the empty void greeted me. Or was it empty? The entity could be inches away, its presence a cold dread that settled into our bones. "Focus," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "We can't let it in, not into our minds." I could feel the weight of its gaze, the pressure of its cosmic malice pressing against the thin veil of reality. My pulse hammered in my ears, a relentless drumbeat urging me to flee, to escape the darkness that no light could ever truly penetrate. "Stay with me," I said, reaching out to grip Jenna's hand. Her fingers were ice against mine, a tangible reminder that we were still alive, still fighting against the encroaching madness. "We will find a way out of this," I told her, although the promise tasted like ash on my tongue. The entity was ancient, and we were nothing but fleeting sparks in the dark expanse of its domain. But surrender wasn't an option, not yet. The abyss stretched on, silent and waiting, as our flashlights flickered against the suffocating cloak of the universe's darkest secrets. And somewhere, in the spaces between the light, the entity watched, hungering for the constellations it had already devoured, and for us, the interlopers in its endless night. I fumbled with the brittle pages of the ancient manuscript, my hands quivering as the torchlight cast long, ominous shadows upon the arcane symbols. Connor's hushed voice broke the heavy silence, each word slicing through the darkness like a beacon of forbidden knowledge. "Dr. Montclair, this, it speaks of realms beyond our own. A multiverse," he murmured, his young face pale beneath the cold glow. "Dimensions stacked upon dimensions, infinite in number." My heart raced at the implications, a mix of thrill and terror surging within me. "Escape," I whispered back, barely daring to hope. Could we use this knowledge to find a path out of this nightmare? Potentially, Connor replied, though his eyes betrayed an uncertainty that mirrored my own. The possibility of other dimensions taunted me, a cruel mirage promising salvation yet impossibly out of reach. I felt the crushing weight of the celestial abyss pressing down on us, suffocating in its vast emptiness. God, my voice was a ragged echo in the void. We're lost in an ocean of stars, adrift without a compass. I could almost hear the entity's silent laughter, mocking our feeble attempts to understand a cosmos that defied comprehension. Every direction looks the same. Every shadow hides the same fear. I choked on the next words, the taste of dread thick in my mouth. Are we doomed to wander here forever, chasing after whispers of hope? Connor placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, but it did little to steady my shaking resolve. The void was relentless, and within its gaping maw, even the brightest light of human intellect seemed nothing more than a flickering candle soon to be snuffed out by the winds of eternity. I fumbled for the tattered notebook in my pack, its edges frayed from countless thumbings. The faint glow of our flashlights cast eerie shadows on the pages as I flipped them open, a beacon of order amidst the chaos that surrounded us. "Here," Amelia whispered, her voice steady, despite the panic gnawing at the edges of her composure. She leaned closer, her breath warm against my cheek as she pointed to a series of scribbled equations and half-finished thoughts. This could be it, Avery. Her proximity was both comforting and unnerving, a human connection in the face of the incomprehensible void. My heart hammered against my ribcage as I caught a glimpse of vulnerability behind her glasses, the same fear that kept me awake at night, wondering if we were mere playthings to the cosmos. "Look at this pattern," I said, tracing a constellation that no longer graced our skies. "It aligns with the legends, the myths Langston spoke of. There's a message here, hidden in plain sight." "An instruction manual written in the stars," Amelia mused, her intellect piercing through the hopelessness. "If we can decipher it, then maybe," I cut in, not daring to finish the thought aloud. We both knew the stakes, the slim chance of threading the needle between dimensions, of finding a way home. "Let's get to work." Her determination echoed my own, and together we pored over the materials with a fervor I hadn't felt since the first time I peered through a telescope and glimpsed the vast frontier beyond our little blue planet. As we delved into the cosmic enigma, I allowed myself to believe, just for a moment, that salvation lay within reach, hidden in the whispers of the universe waiting patiently for us to unravel its secrets. The silence was a living thing, thick and oppressive, wrapping around us like the inky void outside our fragile circle of light. I could hear my own heartbeat, a relentless drumming in my ears that seemed to synchronize with Amelia's shallow breaths. The flashlights cast long shadows on the rocky ground, distorting shapes into grotesque figures that danced at the edge of our vision. "Can you hear it?" Amelia whispered, her voice barely rising above the hush that enveloped us. My ears strained against the quiet, searching for the sound she sensed. And then, faintly, as if from an immeasurable distance, came a low, mournful wail, a sound not of this world. It was the entity, I realized with a shudder, its hunger echoing through the abyss, reaching out for the constellations that had slipped from the sky like tears from the eyes of the gods. "Is it calling to them?" I muttered, unable to shake off the bone-deep chill that settled over me. "Or to us," Amelia replied, her hand gripping mine for a fleeting second before she pulled away, her focus returning to the ancient texts spread out before us. I turned back to the scattered pages, the symbols and diagrams swimming before my eyes. Doubt gnawed at me with sharp teeth, whispering insidious thoughts. Was I fooling myself, believing we could find answers in these cryptic relics? My palms grew clammy as I contemplated the enormity of our task. deciphering a celestial code with the fate of our sanity, perhaps even our lives, hanging precariously in the balance. With shaky hands, I picked up a chart, the lines and dots a map to possible salvation or damnation. I couldn't let the fear win, not when Amelia's unwavering trust anchored me. So I focused on the task, on the hope that somewhere within the tangled threads of cosmic lore lay our escape route from this nightmarish abyss. "Connor, we're not splitting up," I snapped, my voice low but laced with an urgency that reverberated through the unsettling stillness of the abyss. The beam from my flashlight quivered as I faced him, the shadows around us seeming to lean in closer, hungry for discord. "Splitting up increases our chances," Connor retorted, his usually timid demeanor now edged with a sharpness born of desperation. "If we cover more ground." "Or it ensures that we get picked off one by one," Amelia interjected, her glasses catching the scant light as she stepped between us. The air felt charged, the tension tangible enough to choke on. "Enough." Professor Langston's authoritative voice cut through the argument like a knife. He stepped forward, the lines on his face deepening in the shifting glow of our flashlights. "Avery, you lead. We stay together. Our strength is in unity." I nodded, conceding to his wisdom, though my pulse thrummed with anxiety. We moved forward as one, our footsteps muted against the alien terrain beneath our boots. A hushed breath escaped me. The entity was out there somewhere in the vast darkness, and each step felt like walking deeper into its gaping maw. We trudged on until Mariah froze, her hand shooting up to signal a halt. We clustered behind her, and my heart sank at what lay before us. An immense chasm, its depths lost to the void, stretching as far as our lights could pierce the dark. "Damn it!" I cursed under my breath, the chilling realization setting in. This obstacle might as well be the end of all paths, a cruel barrier mocking our feeble attempts at escape. "Can we go around it?" Amelia asked, peering into the abyss with trepidation etched into her features. "Too wide," Mariah assessed, her eyes scanning the insurmountable gap, "and too risky in the dark." "Then we go back," Connor suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Back where?" I challenged, unable to keep the edge from my tone. "To what? There's nothing for us but this. This," I gestured helplessly toward the expanse, and that, my arm swept behind us to where the entity's presence loomed, an ever-present threat. "Maybe there's a way across," Professor Langston offered, stepping closer to the chasm. His gaze was pensive, analytical, even in the face of fear. "Or down," I said, the idea emerging from a place of wild hope, or perhaps sheer madness. There could be a passage we're not seeing, something hidden. "Are you suggesting we descend?" Amelia's voice wavered, disbelief mingling with the dread that had become our constant companion. "Exactly," I affirmed. "Tethered ropes, slow and steady. It's a gamble, but staying here, waiting for the entity to claim us, that's certain doom." "Then let's face the unknown rather than cower from it," Amelia declared, her voice now steady with a steely determination that bolstered my own. "Prepare the ropes," Mariah commanded, already moving into action with practiced efficiency. My hands were steady as I secured my harness. The decision made, our course set. The chasm awaited, a silent siren calling us into its depths. And within its shadowed embrace, either salvation or demise would greet us. Gripping the rope with white-knuckled determination, I began my descent. The abyss swallowed me whole, the cold embrace of the void pressing against my skin like a shroud. Amelia's breaths echoed mine, short, sharp intakes that cut through the silence. "Steady," Mariah called from above, her voice a lifeline in the tangible darkness. The entity was all around us, a hunger, vast and silent. Yet, as we inched our way down, the terror that had been gnawing at the edges of my mind receded, replaced by an ember of hope. Each downward movement felt like progress, like defiance. "Watch for loose stones," Professor Langston warned, his tone cautious yet laced with excitement that mirrored my own. "Got it," Connor replied, his youthful voice steadier than I expected. The jagged walls of the chasm offered scarce footholds, but I found them, driven by an urgency that lent strength to my limbs. We were explorers charting a course through uncharted territories, pioneers on the edge of a revelation so profound that fear had no place among us. "Feels like we're going somewhere," I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. "Or being led," Amelia countered softly, close behind me. Her hand brushed against mine, a fleeting connection that spoke volumes. "Let's just keep moving," I said, pushing away thoughts that threatened to shatter my newfound resolve. We reached a narrow ledge, and one by one, we huddled together, catching our breath. The faint glow from our flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced like specters on the walls. It was then I noticed it, a pattern etched into the rock, ancient symbols that beckoned with an otherworldly allure. Could this be it? Connor's voice trembled with anticipation as he traced the markings. The message we've been searching for? Perhaps Professor Langston mused, squinting at the strange glyphs. But deciphering it is another matter. "Let's document everything," I suggested, my heart racing. This was why we'd come, to unlock secrets not meant for human understanding. "Wait," Amelia's whisper sliced through our excitement. "It's deliberate. A trap?" "Impossible to know without," I began. But the ground beneath us shifted subtly, an ominous rumble that silenced every hope. "Move!" Mariah yelled, just as the ledge gave way. We scrambled, the world tilting as I fought for purchase. Rocks cascaded into the abyss, their clattering a cacophony of doom. And then silence. No ledge, no path, just the void and the entity lurking within. "Everyone okay?" My voice was hoarse, disbelief mingling with a rising despair. "Here," they replied in turn, each affirmation a small miracle. "Everything we've done." Amelia's gaze met mine, a mirror of my own defeat. "It's just brought us closer to its center." "Then we're right where it wants us," I said, the realization dawning like a chill. All our efforts, our struggles, had only tightened the noose. "Keep your lights off," Mariah instructed, a sense of command returning to her voice. "Save the batteries. We'll need them to study these symbols, find a real way out." "Assuming there is one," Professor Langston added, his usual confidence now tinged with doubt. "Assuming," I agreed, facing the inky blackness ahead. Our journey was far from over, but the glimmer of hope that had ignited in my chest was smothered, leaving only the cold certainty that all our efforts had merely entombed us here forever.